Sometimes people get discouraged because they say, well, we don't have the 51%. We certainly don't even have 5% in Washington. But you don't have, it is not a total numbers game. It has to do with people being in the right places and speaking and talking about the right things. A teacher or a writer is so much important than those who just follow and go along. So being in a position of influence is very important. The leadership is key to it. So don't count the numbers entirely. Washington, if they knew that the people were waking up and the intellectuals were talking our way, congressmen would change. They will mold very easily, just like they go along with what we have now. They will change if they hear from you, and they're starting to hear from us. I heard that there were a few rallies on April 15th. Sound like a pretty good idea. But when this happens, we don't know exactly. We could linger for a while. I happen to think the financial markets aren't in a recovery phase like some people are dreaming. And just think of the loss of trillions and trillions of dollars and the concern many of you must have about where your job is coming from. So the investment right now for all of us, every single one of us, is to invest in the cause of liberty. A lot of people invest and they worry about their finances and they do a very good job. But ultimately, the most important investment is investing in a free society. And that is why America was great. America was great because we had the best understanding, the best Constitution, and we had the freest system ever. And we became the most prosperous. Until finally, the determination was always that of the material things. Because capitalism and freedom does produce a lot of materialism and material benefits, and that's the great part about it. But lo and behold, after a while, instead of the lobbyists coming to Washington to make sure that they were free citizens with a government that was small and that we weren't doing too many things overseas, they started coming to Washington to help divvy up the loot, to spread the loot around, redistribute the wealth. We became materialistic in that sense. And like I say, there's nothing wrong with materialism that you earn. But this idea that Washington became just nothing more than a source of redistributing the wealth, then we forgot about emphasizing the important issues that maintain the society that can produce wealth. And that, of course, is what is being challenged. I am convinced that in the lifetime of almost everybody in this room, that we will have to be confronted, a decision will have to be made, and the decision's going to not be too complicated. There's only one question that we have to answer. What do you think the role of government ought to be? And should the role of government be there to police the world or take care of somebody's buddy and redistribute wealth, to run the banking system where they have certain advantages and we get contracts from the government and we can manipulate the tax code to certain advantages? Or was the Constitution designed for that very important purpose? That is the protection of liberty. That is what it's for. Now, the Constitution was explicit. It's very clear on what it's supposed to do. And it doesn't have anything in there that tells the federal government they have the authority to regulate you and constrain you or tell you what to do with your life. The Constitution the Constitution says very clearly that it's there to restrain the government, not the people. In a free society, you have the greatest amount of productivity, you'll have the greatest amount of abundance. We should never be bashful for arguing that, because the big government folks have for so long wanted to make us feel guilty by saying, oh, you're selfish, you want to take care of yourself, you're not humanitarians, we care about people. We want to give food here and free medical care here and free education here, but they never talk about who paid for it. But they want us to look cold-hearted. The truth is, the results of their so-called generosity with our money has turned this country upside down. So if we want to be generous and humanitarian in what we do, you have to argue the case for free markets and sound money. That's when the maximum number of people will be taken care of. The wonderful thing about living in a free country, and we should all be grateful that we have had this opportunity, because it certainly was the freest ever. But what it does, it allows us to release our creative energy. Some would argue, no, in a free country where you can make up your own minds, you might go out and drink too much beer and too much alcohol and smoke too many cigarettes and eat too much. But you also might be more creative, ambitious, and willing to take care of your families and take care of your neighbors and contribute to your churches and local government and get further educated. And that is what is the wonderful part about it. You have the greatest chance to work for your own excellence and work for virtue, which is really what we're supposed to be doing in life. And under an authoritarian state, under a tyrant, it becomes much more difficult because survival is the only thing that you have to deal with. And today we're moving into that mode that survival might be our most important thing that we do. But freedom is what we seek, because under freedom is when we can work for those things that we consider so important and creative and artistic. But when this time comes, it's going to be difficult to make decisions on exactly what we should do and when we should do it. And quite frankly, I don't know. Even 20 or 30 years ago, I talked to people who were concerned, and they wanted to move out of the country and opt out of the system and all these other things. And that was when I decided that I would work within the system and do my very best to try to bring about changes. Now, I've never been one to go to Washington, and frequently I do not call myself a legislator in the conventional sense. I want to deal with the big picture. I want to deal with the philosophy. I want to move bills that only deal with making a point. I don't want to take a bad bill and have an amendment and cut $5 out and say, oh, I got my amendment passed, so therefore I can vote for the bill. That is not what I want to do, and I don't think we should be doing that. We should be looking at the big picture, and we should know what we believe in and argue the case. We might not ever get that perfect free society. I'm quite convinced we won't. But if we don't know what it's like, and we can't describe it, and we can't visualize it, and we always start off by compromising with the other side, I don't think that's much of a compromise. You know, if you believe in total freedom and you compromise with somebody who's a total dictatorship, you still have half a dictatorship. So I'm not for that. Ideas are the most powerful things that we can deal with. Politicians are very powerful. There is no doubt about it. And political parties, they deal only in power. They want to get power, and what do? You know, I'm sure you know what they do. When Republicans get in control, and they get your attention by saying, oh, we want limited government, we believe in personal liberty, we believe in no nation building, then all of a sudden they get in and they say, oh, how am I going to keep in power? I've won over all those conservatives, but now I have to win over the liberals. So when Republicans get in, they act like Democrats and start spending like Democrats. Now, when Democrats get in power, they do exactly the same thing. They get in power by saying, well, we're going to take care of all the poor people and have all these welfare programs. But as soon as they get in, they have to prove themselves by becoming warmongers and sending more troops and spending even more money on the military. And policies never change. What has to change are ideas. We're in this mess not because of just the politicians who were there and sort of flip coins and decide what to do. They are a consequence of ideology. They are a consequence of philosophy. I mean, one time on a radio show, they asked me who I thought was contributed most to this bad political problem we have. And they were trying to get me to say it was all Obama's fault. Yeah, he's been in office for 3 months, and we're going to blame the whole thing on him. We might blame him for perpetuating it, but then I got to thinking, you know, the individual who probably contributed the most to this was probably Keynes, the economist, because he had taught us for